This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India Innovation Index 2020. The participants are Shekhar Iyer, political analyst, and Neelabh Srivastav, journalist.
The Niti Aayog on Wednesday released the second Innovation Index of states. This was released by the Aayog's Vice Chairman Mr. Rajiv Kumar and CEO Mr. Amitabh Kant. And this has been developed on the lines of the Global Innovation Index. The last or the first edition of this Innovation Index was released in October 2019, and this was a maiden exercise to bring together the metrics of assessing the innovation capabilities of various states in the country and also the union territories. According to the data that has been released today on Wednesday, Karnataka has topped the chart straight second time in a row, and this is followed by states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Kerala and so on. The index basically aims to analyze and assimilate a number of development-related indices under the larger umbrella of innovation. Will that be correct to say, Mr. Iyer?
Indeed, because innovation, need to encourage innovation, and what exactly we mean by innovation. All these things are now gaining importance because India's wish of becoming a $5 trillion economy is intricately linked with this innovation-oriented approach to economic growth. See, in this pandemic crisis, what has come very clear is most countries are looking inward. India should also use this opportunity to build its own innovative capabilities to meet future global demand so that we are able to produce a range of novel products, create novel services and processes. And what happens normally when there is an economic crisis, people don't look for innovation. They rather try to conserve whatever is there. Because a good example is one of the depressing years in America when actually the number of patents that were being filed, whether individual or firm-based patents, they came down. But in the present scenario, what has happened is, after the government has come up with this Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India campaign, you are seeing there is a strong push to empower local manufacturing sector so that we can produce innovative products at an economical rate and then go for competition. So in this context, the idea of going for an India Innovation Index has gained very much importance. And the other important aspect is India has just broken into the top 50 nations of Global Innovation Index. In fact, the World Intellectual Property Organization, they have declared India as one of the leading innovators in the Central and Southern Asia region. So therefore, I think this second edition of this index is going to give us a detailed insight into what all goes into making the best innovation ecosystem, both at the national level and also at the state level.
Mr. Iyer, you said this is more often looks like to be more of a healthy competition because when we have different kind of states competing for excellence, there is where you get solutions to day-to-day problems of the life, overall the regime of doing business. And I would like to ask you a question. Is this also to do with the overall government philosophy or the agenda of ensuring ease of doing business? I was listening to Mr. Rajiv Kumar. He was speaking and he said that this is also aimed at cutting the red tape in different processes that the government has and also step to ensure or to probably pave a way to bring back talent to India which can manufacture, innovate and contribute to the national mainstream.
Indeed, Neelabh. See, the present edition, the second edition of India Innovation Index has been compiled keeping some realities in mind. And the idea is when you identify the difficulties, when you identify the hurdles, which is preventing good ecosystem that encourages innovation, the state governments can actually get down into removing these hurdles so that the policymakers and other stakeholders can get a comprehensive assessment. Because what they have done is they have divided innovation system into two groups. One is the enablers, other is the performers. And by bringing these two ways of looking at the innovation system and grading the states accordingly, what they are doing is, like for instance, enablers. What enables the creation of an innovation system? Where they have identified human capital in terms of identifying number of people who are working on PhDs, people who are filing for patents, people who are filing for processes, and then on the basis of these patents, what kind of investment are being attracted. Then, in order to enable a conducive environment, what is the safety environment, what is the legal environment, and followed by what is the business environment that is created. So these are the 5 things way of looking at what is enabling innovation, or the enablers. Now the other side is what is called the performers. On the basis of enablers, you can see how the knowledge output is taking place. First at the grassroots level, innovation, then as I mentioned, patent application and innovation application, trademark application. Then from that comes what is called the startups. Government of India has gone in a very big way to promote startups in terms of giving them tax concessions, in making capital available. So how are the startups growing in these various states on the basis of the environment? Then most important thing is how is the knowledge of innovative products, innovative practices and innovative processes, how are they being diffused? What kind of indications are coming by way of what exports are taking place? What are the geographical indications? What are the industry-based indications? So on these parameters, both enablers and performers, the states have been ranked this time. So therefore, what we are seeing is each state government is free to create the kind of environment to attract these innovators. The Prime Minister has always been saying that our federalism must also mean there is a competition among states to attract talents, to attract startups. And for the other service sector, which will come obviously when the startups start coming up with very economic models.
The enablers and performers, two very important words you said, Mr. Iyer. Also, such an exercise, a stock-taking exercise, or we may call it a SWOT kind of an exercise, where you analyze your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. The exercise also aims to identify the gaps and the human resources that are available with us and probably what can be hired from the open market or from dipping into the talent pool. No talk today, Iyer Saab, has a background of the COVID-19 pandemic that is still raging. We have seen that the vaccines are now out, but still the pandemic is still here. And we are talking of a new normal across the globe. So these kind of innovations, are we also linking it to the self-reliant or the Atmanirbhar Bharat kind of a concept where we are also looking at reducing our dependence on imports?
Absolutely. In fact, I will draw your attention. The fact that, the way we tackled the COVID itself. For instance, when the COVID outbreak was noticed, our first challenge was finding the necessary personal protection equipment, which initially we had to import because we didn't have local manufacturers. But within a couple of months, we saw that number of local entrepreneurs got into making this personal protection equipment, what is called the PPE, for our health workers to handle the COVID cases. That is a good example of urgently created innovation. And within 6 months, we were actually exporting PPE to different countries. That is one. Second example of innovation I can see is COVID vaccine. One vaccine is what is your Covishield, which has been developed by the Serum Institute in collaboration with Oxford. Now the other one which has come, Covaxin, which is actually an innovative program of biotech company and the Indian Council of Medical Research. Now, this itself shows, when it comes to tackling pandemic, you need this kind of innovative sticks. And that itself shows, not just in the case of emergencies like the pandemic, even in other areas, more and more innovation means less dependence on outside, dependent on factors which are not in your control. Because at least within the country, you have sufficient human talent pool. You have the available financial assistance. And you have governments, state governments who actually do their part to encourage such startups and such innovative processes. So this is very important. And the other thing we must remember is, why is this innovation index looking at it in terms of states? Because the whole innovation landscape as we see it today has to take into account the differences or disparities in states. Some states have very good infrastructure facilities, but other states are far lagging behind. So the idea is we have to maximize their innovative capacities and we'll have to provide solutions. That can come only when you have some kind of a parameter, some kind of standardization to look at the problems. So that across states you can see which are the states which are having problems and what can be a solution. Now an index like this produced by NITI Aayog helps the state governments because these state governments can look at states which are doing well and also pick up the best practices from there and implement in their own states. Their own local innovators can be encouraged to utilize whatever is available and do the best.
While one understands that the unique geographical location or a demographic dividend for a particular state may act very favorable or pose a challenge to a particular state, Mr. Iyer, vis-a-vis innovation capabilities, but what could be the indices that could be uniform for all the states? For example, easing restrictions, cutting taxes or bottlenecks, ensuring better roads and rail connectivity and infrastructure development. Where is there also a scope within this innovation indices or the index where you can collaborate multiple states who share borders or who do not? Can there be a scope for that also?
Well, I think the states are realizing and are going to realize more that innovation is not a process limited to a particular firms or particular industry. Rather, it is a multi-sectoral process involving various actors, various institutions and organizations. If we have created an economy that is steered by innovation across all sectors, it means that you have to create a conducive innovation ecosystem. And that will mean what? You will have to be very inclusive and sensitive to the aspiration and needs of this country. Demand is always created when you are able to identify what is it that people are aspiring for. What kind of processes can bring about the ease of business or ease of life, which you mentioned at the beginning.
Also talking about post-pandemic scenario when we had lockdown and then the economy went into revival mode, and then we had simultaneous unlocks and also different steps taken by the governments even in the private sector to get back into the original mode, spin the wheels of the economy as fast as it could. But when it comes to job creation and also one specific subject of a special incentive given to certain states, maybe northeastern states, there has been a special thrust on the northeast region of the country by various ministries of the government, and also incentivizing maybe hill states because they have a very peculiar kind of a location. So are these indices also taken into consideration when we talk about the innovation index?
I think so, because they have actually divided in this grouping that they have made. This particular index, what they have done is they have divided the states and the territories into 17 major states. States which have fairly a rather rich resource base in terms of infrastructure, in terms of finances, and 10 northeast and hill states. They have put all the hill states which have problems in terms of logistics, in terms of accessibility. They have put them in separate category, and then they have put 9 city states like Delhi or Chandigarh and the union territories which are coming in this. Now, these 3 categories can be seen in terms of the outcome and governance, because the Prime Minister keeps on saying that let us not be process-oriented, let us be outcome-oriented. Let us work for a system that looks at what is the final outcome. Now, when you look at the final outcome, obviously, employment generation will be a very important indicator of what kind of innovative practices are being encouraged by the respective state government. Now, hill states, whatever is in the digital era, these hill states can actually go for a lot of schemes which, taking the help of centers approach, that these backward regions must get a lot of financial assistance and encourage local talent to go for more startups and processes which the hill states can easily create at a short span of time.
My last question to you, Mr. Iyer. Again, I will talk about COVID-19, and in that context, this innovation index. It is going to be a new normal. We need to look at out-of-box solutions, rely very heavily on technology because the WFH, or so to say, work from home, and WFA, work from anywhere, that regime has kicked in. More and more institutions are looking forward to adopting these. And for a country like India, which is aiming to be a 5 trillion economy, how do you see this innovation index helps out and also pans out the kind of invitation to the investors from across the globe and also within the country to boost manufacturing and domestic manufacturing capabilities by way of Make in India, Made in India?
So, the reality today, Nilab, is that India and the world have undergone a tectonic shift due to this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, many of countries have seen economic shutdown, and they are recovering from that. Now, because of this scenario, the role of innovation as an important tool or an agent to revitalize the economy has never been more important. Therefore, this 2020 edition of this innovation index is definitely going to be a new way of looking at things, new way of giving that booster dosage that is required for the economy. Therefore, I feel that with this kind of new ways of looking at and measuring up the economy in terms of innovation and encouraging more startups, more process and more entrepreneurs to look at innovation as a way of economic growth, I think it's a very important indicator for in the times to come, and there is never going to be a go back to old ways of doing things.
Right, never going back to the things, and obviously the first ratings when the world has not seen the COVID-19 pandemic. The second ratings have come at a time when we are already battling and now emerging out from the shadow of what we have gone through in the year 2020. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, Mr. Iyer.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on India Innovation Index 2020. The participants were Shekhar Iyer, political analyst, and Neelabh Srivastav, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.